Okay. And then if he comes in, we'll just make sure that he comes into roll call. So, all right. Well, pound a virtual gavel. Good afternoon. This is Michael Marks, Chair of the Apex Planning Board. Happy New Year's to all, and I hope that all the board members, staff, and their families are safe and healthy. We need to do attendance by roll call today, so when I say your name, just please respond. Michael Marks is present. I'd also like to, Reggie Skinner, I think you're out there.
Present. And
thank you for becoming the Vice Chair of the Planning Board, so congratulations and thank you.
My pleasure.
Mark Steele.
I'm here.
Okay, Mark Steele is there. Good. Tina Sherman.
Present.
Okay, Tommy Pate.
Here.
Tim Royal.
Present.
Keith Braswell.
Present.
Jeff Hastings.
Present.
And Ryan Akers.
Present.
Okay, so we have all members are in attendance. So at this time, I'd like to offer an invocation for today's meeting. Father, we come to you at this time, asking for your blessings and help as we are gathered together in this virtual environment. We pray for guidance in the matters at hand and ask that you help guide us in the meeting today so that we can improve our town in the days and months ahead. Bless this meeting today, all those present, as well as the lives of those we encounter afterwards. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. And if you mind, please stand and recite the pledge. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all. All right, thank you very much. So, quick introduction message. So for anyone who can join on the phone, today's meeting presentation is posted on the planning board page of the town's website. That website address to get the presentations for today is www.apexnc.org//182. As a reminder, members of the public who have called in today are in listen-only mode. All participants will be muted initially. Roll call for voting on any action items will be conducted by calling out the name of each planning board member. Presenters will indicate when they are advancing slides to allow the audience to follow along on the presentations available online. If any disruptions occur either with video feed or audio or on phone, the staff will first mute all, and then at my direction and the attendees with the disrupted will be muted by the staff. Then message to all the planning board members. So while the presentations are occurring, we'll mute all lines except for the presenters to help with the audio quality. When we get to questions and discussion points, the chair will indicate that the floor is open for any comments and discussion. At that time, you may either raise your hand if you have your video on or unmute yourself and ask the question or comment. The chat box should not be used for any discussion of any items during the meeting, but may be used if you have technical issues or need the staff to assist you. When you do either raise your hand or get ready to make a comment or ask a question, please state your name when you unmute before you ask a comment so that any questions we know who's speaking and the minutes can be documented correctly. Please remember to mute yourself once all of your speaking is completed. If a voting member of the board logs off, we will pause briefly to allow time for him or her to reestablish connection. This will help to avoid any repeated information. So any questions from the board members at this time? Okay. And then message to the public attendees who are in listen only mode. Public comments received via email and voicemail by noon on Friday, January 8th will be read into the record during the appropriate time during this meeting, and full copies attached to the meeting minutes. Since this meeting is being held remotely, public comments on public hearing items will be received up until 24 hours after the end of this meeting. Any additional comments received will be read into the record during the January 13th, 2021 Planning Board meeting when we will vote on any public hearing items. If you miss the Planning Board comment deadline, you can still use the same email and voicemail number to provide comments to the Town Council up until Monday, January 25th, 2021. And then Diane, do we have any items of information for the day's meeting?
Yes, I just wanted to remind everybody that we have a future land use map public workshop on Tuesday, January 19th at 6 p.m. It will be held virtually. You should have received the link, but if you don't have it and you're interested, let me know and I will make sure to get that out to you. We will be talking about proposed land use changes around transit stops and transit routes.
Okay. Is that it or anything else?
Oh, yes, that's all tonight.
Okay, thanks, Diane. So the next is the public comment for any non-public agenda items. So staff, did we receive any comments for any non-public comment agenda items?
We did not.
Okay. With that, I'll move on to consent item number 1, which were the minutes from the December 14th, 2020 regular meeting. If there was, I assume everybody read them. Are there any discussion or possible motion?
I moved that we accept the minutes from the last meeting as they were published.
Okay, and that was Mark. When you
That
do
was
make a
Mark's.
motion, remember to make
Thank
your.
You're right.
So Mark Steele made a motion. Do I have a second?
Tim Royal make a second.
Okay, Tim Royal, we have a second. All those in favor. Now we have to go through the roll call again. Michael Marks votes yes. Reggie Skinner.
Yes.
Mark Steele.
Yes.
Tina Sherman.
Yes.
Tommy Pate.
Yes.
Tim Royal.
Yes.
Keith Braswell.
Yes.
And Ryan Akers.
Yes.
Okay, motion to approve the minutes from the December 14th passes unanimously. Now we will move to the public hearing. And Shannon Cox will present the public hearing regarding the Town of Apex Affordable Housing Plan. And just to remember, so Shannon will present, we'll open for any public hearing comments that the staff received. We'll close the public comment, we'll have discussions, but no motions or voting until January 13th. So with that, Shannon, take it away.
Okay, thank you. Good evening. So for those listening remotely, I am starting on slide 3. The purpose of this public hearing, as mentioned, is to consider a recommendation regarding adoption of the town's affordable housing plan. Moving to slide 4. This evening, we will briefly cover the plan's purpose and process. Most of the presentation focuses on comments received on the public draft and changes made to the plan in response. We will have an opportunity for discussion and the public hearing. Slide 6. The town's draft affordable housing plan is intended to identify our affordable housing needs, which was done through a needs assessment as well as stakeholder and public engagement, and then propose land use and subsidy tools that the town can use to address those needs. This plan does not identify or propose specific affordable housing development projects. So just wanted to clarify that right off the bat. On slide 7, there's a brief summary of the schedule and process that we used to develop this plan. It took approximately 8 months, actually almost 9 at this point. We began the process with the housing needs assessment, which involved data analysis as well as stakeholder outreach. We used that information to develop plan recommendations, and that phase lasted from September through early winter. We have since been working on drafting the plan and revising it through steering committee and stakeholder feedback. We had a public presentation of the draft plan in December, and we are having public hearings before the planning board and town council this month. Slide 8 is a summary of how stakeholder input was gathered and used throughout the plan development process. The initial survey was our big push to gather input as well as raise awareness that the town was working on this plan. And we did hear from approximately 1,200 people through that initial survey. Our consultant, HR&A, also conducted interviews with stakeholders as well as individuals impacted by affordable housing issues in town. We presented updates to the planning board and to the town council throughout the project, and then, as I mentioned, just had that workshop in December. So on slide 10, as a reminder, the Affordable Housing Plan has 5 main sections: an introduction, the housing needs assessment, the vision and goals for the plan, recommendations, and then an action plan for implementation. There's also an appendix with detailed information. So most of the remaining slides go through section by section, and I'll summarize the major comments that were received on the public draft and the changes that we've made in response. So on slide 11, the introduction to the plan includes the plan's purpose, explains the role of the town in housing affordability, provides a definition of affordable housing, and summarizes the planning context and process. In this section, the main comment received from the public was a need to better clarify and capture the purpose of the plan. So the recommended draft does revise that purpose language to more fully explain the purpose of the affordable housing plan. On slide 12, the housing needs assessment includes a summary of both the data analysis as well as the stakeholder input on housing needs in Apex, and summarizes housing trends and challenges. It also references an appendix which goes into much more detail about the data analysis. The major comments received for this section are that there's a desire to have the gap in affordable units for home ownership quantified in a way similar to what we've provided for rental units. There was also a desire to quantify the number of essential workers who work in Apex but do not live in Apex. We are not recommending changes in response to these comments. We've discussed them with our consultant, and they've indicated that there's really not good data to capture these specific metrics that are desired, and that the housing needs assessment provided captures the most important data for Apex in the most meaningful way. We have included text in the recommendations now to work to enhance the annual housing report and dashboard over time to better capture data and present it to the public in a meaningful way so that we can show both the need and progress over time through that tool. I'm on slide 13, which addresses the plan's vision and goals. The main comment that we received for this section is related to the goal to partner regionally to meet the needs of vulnerable populations. The comment was that we need to make sure that this recommendation focuses on housing needs specifically and not general social services. And so we have added the descriptor that that goal should be focused on housing needs. On slide 14, this gets into the meat of the plan, which are the recommendations. And recommendations have been captured in 3 main categories. The first is to build the town's capacity. Related to town staff capacity, we received comments that the town should expedite the hiring of a housing manager, since this is considered a key milestone critical to plan implementation, and there's a desire to build on the momentum that's already been created. We also received comments that we need to acknowledge the administrative cost of a new staff position, and there were comments about the particular qualifications of the person hired. So in the recommended plan, we have emphasized that hiring a housing manager should be a key priority for the town. Did I hear a comment? No, okay. And then related to the Housing Advisory Board, we received comments that, again, we need to acknowledge the administrative burden of having a housing advisory board. There were also comments about the responsibilities and duties of the board and the specific makeup of the board. And we have not recommended changes in response to those comments. I'm on slide 15 now. The second category of recommendations are to advance advocacy and public education. For the recommendation to create an annual housing report and dashboard, we received a comment related to the metrics, which was similar to what was provided with the housing needs assessment, that we need to quantify and report gaps in units in progress over time. And this is where we did make that change in the text to work to enhance that dashboard. Regarding diversity and racial equity initiatives, we received comments both in support of and against including diversity as part of this plan. This was a specific vision and goal that the steering committee felt was important to include, and so we are not recommending changes to this part of the plan. Related to affordable housing advocacy and partners, we did not receive comments and have not made changes. Slide 16. For the affordable housing incentive zoning recommendation, we received several comments that the language needed to be clarified to make it clear that incentive zoning cannot, that affordable housing cannot be required, and that this would be an incentive-based program. Our consultants did review the language and have made several changes to clarify that this would not be a requirement, rather an incentive. There were no comments related to soft density by right zoning. Related to transit-oriented development density, we received several comments expressing support for planning affordable housing near transit. No changes have been made. On slide 17, related to accessory apartments, we received questions about whether this should be a higher priority given the public support, and also received a question about who would manage loans for accessory apartments. We have not recommended changing the priority for this particular tool. While it was supported in the survey, we do need to balance how many recommendations we show as near or even midterm. And this particular tool is not expected to result in as many actual units created, so it was considered a lower priority by the steering committee. We have added text to this recommendation that the town should consider a partnership to manage the loans for accessory apartments. There were no comments related to low-income housing tax credit gap financing, and we have not made any changes. Related to public land acquisition and sale, there was a comment, which we had also received previously, that this should be a midterm recommendation, and that was an oversight that has been changed from long-term to midterm. On slide 18, there were no comments related to the owner-occupied rehabilitation assistance recommendation. We received several comments throughout the about the plan that we should keep a focus on the next generation and first-time home buyers, and felt the best place to address that was with the down payment assistance and home ownership counseling recommendation. So in the recommended draft, we've emphasized that this particular tool is intended for first-time home buyers. That was not clear previously. And there were no comments and no changes related to emergency rental assistance and supportive services. We did receive a couple of comments that related to potential additional recommendations. One was a suggestion to prohibit landlords from refusing to accept Section 8 vouchers. And we did look into this, and the town does not have the legal authority to do this, so we have not made a change to the plan. Similarly, there was a suggestion to consider a program that would forgive property taxes. And once again, we looked into this, and tax abatement is not allowed under North Carolina law, so we have not made a change to the plan. And I'm now on slide 20, which gets into the action plan. The action plan includes a matrix of recommendations, compares that to the vision and goals, and sets priorities for near, mid, and long-term implementation. It also includes measures of success and recommends funding for the plan implementation. We did receive a comment that the town's affordable housing fund should be prioritized for sustainable solutions, which are considered the creation of new affordable units and preservation of existing affordable units, and that crisis services should be funded from other sources. So we have added text to the action plan to capture sustainable solutions as a priority. We also provide an appendix pointing to additional funding sources. We've also we had one sample allocation of the town's affordable housing plan. We've added a second. So one is now focused on a potential near-term allocation of the fund, and that allocation removes the emergency rental assistance and supportive services, and then the long-term allocation includes it. The thought here is that the town currently provides grants to help with these type of crisis services. There's also other funding available for emergency rental assistance, but over the long term that could change, so we don't want to lose sight on that need. On slide 21, we've captured that we received comments that the town's $1 million affordable housing fund will likely not be enough to close the gap in units needed. We also received comments expressing concern about implementing or the cost of implementing recommendations in the plan. So to really address both of these, our consultant suggested that we look to leveraging funds outside of the town's local affordable housing fund, and they've provided resources for us to do that in an appendix. We also received additional comments about the urgency of hiring a housing manager, and so the action plan reiterates the need to move forward with this step. Okay, I'm on slide 22, which is the discussion slide. The comments that I went through were what we received up to December 28th, which was when we had requested public comments. But we have received additional comments and will continue to receive them through the town council's public hearing. So I have a few comments that were not submitted as public hearing comments that I thought I could just paraphrase during this portion of the presentation. And then I have three comments that I can read during the public hearing, which are for the record. So the first paraphrase comment is that we did receive additional comments that diversity and racial equity initiatives should not be incorporated in the plan. The comment cited that there's not direct relevance to housing affordability, and indicated opposition to setting racial equity goals and moral opposition to other initiatives that balance diversity. The second paraphrase comment was concern about the incentive zoning condition. Once again, similar to other comments, there was concern that the way it was written made it sound like a requirement, and the examples provided are not broad enough. We should also consider waiving or incentives such as waiving architectural requirements, which contribute to cost of housing. This commenter also noted that it was hoped the specific incentive zoning policy would be part of this plan and needs to be completed sooner rather than later. The third paraphrase comment is that there's concern about lack of a specific affordable housing definition for Apex, and having a clear definition and clear incentives is critical to making progress. Finally, the last new comment is strong support for the recommendation to encourage the development of accessory apartments, with a request to work on 2 challenges as part of implementation that's related to sub-metering and increasing the allowable square footage. And that concludes the presentation, as well as the additional summary of comments received. I do have those comments, additional comments for the public hearing portion, but I will pause at this time.
Thank you, Shannon. And thanks for all your work on this, and to the rest of the steering committee. It's been a monument. The plan has really come together, and also thank Mark Steele as a member of the planning board for helping out on the steering committee. So I think before we go into discussion, do you want to read the 3 other public comments that you received?
So sure, I can. I did forget I had one more slide. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay.
Lots to manage here. I did want to note that the steering committee met on January 7th. 12 members were able to attend that meeting, and they all unanimously recommended adoption of the revised draft plan. So just wanted to provide that recommendation. Planning staff also recommend the updated draft plan. And then the remaining comments I have are part of the public hearing. So would you like me to read those now?
Yeah, I think, we're at the public hearing stage of the virtual meeting. So yeah, go ahead and read those into the record.
Okay. All right. The first comment comes from Suzanne Harris, who is the VP of Governmental Affairs at Home Builders Association of Raleigh-Wake County. Their address is 5580 Centerview Drive in Raleigh. Zip code is 27606. Dear Apex Planning Board members, we applaud the town for their efforts to address the issues of housing affordability. No doubt this was especially challenging to kick off in a year such as 2020 played out to be. That being said, the timing of this draft becoming available for public comment was very poor. It was basically put out there over the holiday season with an expectation to squeeze in 2 public hearings 2 weeks apart, with a potential final vote on January 26th. This is not a recipe for getting meaningful public input on the document or to potentially incorporate those comments into a second draft. Secondly, the stakeholder group should have included the private residential building industry if there is an expectation to strongly encourage them to utilize affordable housing incentive zoning. The Home Builders Association of Raleigh-Wake County is a great resource to provide member volunteers who do business in Apex and can provide useful insight and perspective. This was a missed opportunity. In reading the draft plan, it suggests the use of affordable housing incentive zoning as a way to achieve affordable housing units. The use of this zoning would presumably be voluntary, given that required inclusionary zoning is illegal in North Carolina. However, the word voluntary is not in the document at all, and instead words and phrases like ensure and sets expectations are used, which sound more required than voluntary. We request that the Affordable Housing Plan incorporate clear language that states that the unwillingness or inability to include affordable housing units or payment in lieu cannot by itself be grounds for denial of a project. The economics just cannot work for every project out there, especially the smaller in scale they are. Lastly, we are perplexed by the prioritization in the action plan section under the matrix of recommendations. We would recommend putting low-hanging fruit such as the accessory apartments and soft density zoning by right in the near-term timeline, as well as emergency rental assistance and supportive services given its urgent nature. Thank you for the opportunity to comment on this draft document, and we are willing and available to discuss further. The second comment comes from Cynthia Sheldon of 2128 Vecchio Lane, Apex, North Carolina, 27502. The Town of Apex Affordable Housing Plan is focused on increasing the diversity of the citizens in Apex. Narrowing this focus to housing will not improve citizen diversity. Apex needs a more holistic approach to this goal. Apex has spent years legislating for higher pricing homes by requiring certain aesthetic controls, development standards, low density, and solar requirements. These requirements add costs to housing and lead to a lack of affordable housing. The goal at the time these requirements were enacted was to increase housing assessments to expand the tax base and limit certain kinds of homes. The first step to increasing diversity in housing should be to roll back these high-cost requirements. The second step to increasing citizen diversity would be to improve town cultural offerings that are targeted to certain demographics. If you review the town's list of programming, there is absolutely no offerings of cultural activities geared toward minorities. Instead of wasting taxpayer dollars on a housing manager, the town should focus on utilizing existing staff to plan a more diverse cultural program offering. The third step to increasing citizen diversity would be through economic development. The town has 4 staff members on the economic development staff. These staff members could recruit minority-owned businesses. The town could subsidize the rent for minority-owned businesses in the co-working station. The town could set up a grant to help minority-owned businesses buy buildings to expand their businesses. The fourth step to increasing citizen diversity would be through staff recruiting and development. Recruiting to fill town staff positions through minority-based colleges, churches, or organizations. Creating scholarship programs for minority citizens to attend the Law Enforcement Academy or the Community College for a Trade Education. The Town of Apex has several boards and committees that can successfully manage a diversity and inclusion plan. A housing advisory board is not needed. The Planning and Community Development Board, the Parks, Recreation, and Cultural Resources Advisory Commission, and the Public Arts Committee, along with the Economic Development Department, can work together to successfully address the issue of citizen diversity in the Town of Apex. Thank you for your time, and I look forward to hearing from you with any questions you may have. And the last comment received for the public hearing portion comes from Erica Leatham, VP of Planning and Entitlements with MI Homes of Raleigh. Address is 1511 Sunday Drive, Suite 100, Raleigh, North Carolina, 27607. The Apex Affordable Housing Plan is an ambitious plan to broaden housing choices in the town. Our company has made significant investments in Apex and will bring hundreds of new housing units to Apex over the next several years, including affordable units. We appreciate the opportunity to provide initial thoughts. Before proceeding further with the plan, the town must set clear policy and priorities for the need being served. As noted in the plan, there are multiple strata of housing needs, and each requires a different set of actions. The incentive zoning and soft density by right zoning are very effective tools at providing additional housing units, directly and indirectly influencing affordability. By right zoning can bring units to the market more efficiently, both in terms of time and dollars, and can be applied throughout the town. Incentive zoning is also a useful tool if used properly. In North Carolina, where inclusionary zoning is not permitted, the incentives must be tailored to actually produce affordable units. Affordable should be specifically defined and should include more than just bonus density, such as waiver of UDO standards, reduction or elimination of fees and/or expedited approvals. Specifically, because such conditions are voluntary, affordable housing proffers must be just that, proffers, not the price of the rezoning. All projects cannot support significant affordable housing obligations, and if a one-size-fits-all standard becomes the norm, there will be less impact than otherwise could be produced. Finally, the architectural conditions traditionally applied in zoning proceedings have the unintended consequence of preventing affordable units, because the smaller the unit, the more affordable. However, the garage requirement, among other elements, prohibits smaller homes with a two-car garage. The plan's implementation schedule ignores certain low-hanging fruit, such as by right zoning, accessory apartments, and housing assistance. These elements can be implemented quickly and have immediate and direct impact. The town should review successful programs in other jurisdictions rather than recreate a program from scratch. For example, Durham just successfully adopted a new housing policy, and there are numerous other jurisdictions with affordable housing plans in place long enough to provide best practices. And that concludes the emailed comments that we received.
Okay. Thank you, Shannon, for reading those in. At this time, I'll open it up to the planning board for any discussion. Remember, no motions or voting at this time, but just general discussions. And so when you want to jump in, just please state your name and any comments or questions for Shannon.
Chairman, can I make a question or
Yeah.
state a question?
Yes, go ahead, Ryan.
Well, first off, I think this is a feather in the cap. I think one of the respondents actually used that same language. I think Apex has needed this for a while now. As we, I don't know if the question was asked in the survey to the respondents, but if you ask anybody in Apex, should the people that serve our community, that work for our town, that our EMS workers, if they can't afford to live in this town, I think we have a problem. And I think that if you ask any Apexian if that's an injustice, I think they would agree. I was a little sad to see it, the public reaches out. I think of the respondents, 58% of the respondents, that I think there's only 1,100 Apex residents that responded, said that we have a problem, representing 1% of Apex. I question, is that enough to draw conclusions with only 1% of the people saying we have a problem? That's just an open-ended question, but Shannon, since I see you, I'm going to ask it to you.
Yep. So survey response is always difficult. I would say 1,200 responses is actually very high for a community the size of Apex, and we, compared to other municipalities and planning processes, often have high response rates to our surveys. So while it's not a large percentage of our population in terms of a planning process, I feel good about what we're able to achieve in terms of feedback. And I do feel that we had a very robust engagement process, even though this did occur completely during, the COVID pandemic.
Yeah, this is Mark Ryan. There was a real effort by everybody that was on the steering committee to reach out to their contacts and ask them to reach out to their contacts. So there was a lot of work done beyond the survey, but the survey gave us a real kind of unfiltered, I don't want to say random, because people that answer surveys are different than the average, right? But the survey was a good baseline, but then there was all of us on the steering committee reaching out to our constituencies and then bringing all that input in. And I thought the consultant did a really good job of combining all of that to give us a view through about 12 different lenses. So I think maybe that might make you feel a little better than just thinking everything we did was just based off just the survey.
Yeah, I trust the steering committee, but it was just, I was floored to see the numbers versus the population of Apex, but it is what it is.
Yeah. I think if we had not been in COVID, we would have done something that was modeled after the way they did the downtown revitalization effort with the carousels and that was just fantastic. I wish we could have done that too.
And to be clear, this plan does not contain any policy, correct, Shannon? This is just to set up for future policy.
In terms of the incentive zoning, are you asking about that specifically?
Yes.
Correct. So we need to go through a substantial effort of creating the incentive zoning policy. And I hope that we'll be able to address many of the comments that we received related to that through that process. That is identified as a near-term priority and something that we'll be working on in very short order, and certainly intend to engage the individuals who've provided comments in that regard.
Yes. That was going to be actually one of the points I wanted to go on the record as stating that as currently drafted, that portion of the plan, I think, falls drastically short. And I got to give credit to Ms. Letham's position. She hits on a lot of very important aspects of policy that if you do it wrong, I don't think Apex is going to get what we want. I think it's going to, you're not incentivizing it. It just becomes proffer, and that turns into more of an inclusionary zoning. But in order to have inclusionary zoning, you need to have exclusionary policy. You have to downzone, and then it turns into more money, and you're offsetting affordable units with unaffordable units. But I think some of the things that she pointed out in her statement, we definitely would need to look at. But having said that, I think you're telling me that would happen at the policy stage, not necessarily now with this planning document.
That's right. I mean, I think that it's very helpful that we've had these comments now, at this planning stage. And actually, I'd hoped that I'd have that portion further along at this point, but it's helpful to have these comments to inform the start of it. So yes, I think that the details of how that policy will be structured is yet to come. And we will make sure that we engage Ms. Letham and the HPA as part of that process.
Thank you. And one final point. I was just going to say, Ms. Cox, you were able to go through all the public comments, I think there were 60 of them, and have responses in a very short amount of time. So kudos for doing that. That was impressive.
Thanks.
Anyone else from the planning board?
Yeah, this is Tina. I in part want to echo what Ryan said. This is a monumental feat for sure. And while I also see gaps and holes, many of which were pointed out, I see it as a great starting point. And I appreciate, Shannon, the fact that comments will be additionally receiving the comments, and so as the public is listening, if more comments we receive in, the more that will help inform the policy as it's being written. I think there were so many times throughout 2020 in which I said, if we only had an affordable housing plan, and this is really the start. And again, hats off to the steering committee who did this through COVID. And to that end, so hats off for that. But to that end, because it happened during COVID, because the comments and everything was taken during COVID, I also recognize some of the gaps that we may just not have been able to fill, some of those voices that may not have been able to have been heard because of the challenges that are presented in COVID. And so to know that voices can continue to be received as policy is written, that will be helpful, as well as I see this again as a starting point for us to adjust and perfect as we need to. You know, like I just said, there's so many times I said, if we only had an affordable housing plan, and it is, if we find that the plan has gaps as it continues, you know, as it gets implemented, a policy gets written, we'll be able to come back and address that. But I'm very pleased that we are here and excited to see it implemented.
Hey, Tina, this is Mark. Every meeting we had the steering committee, I heard your voice in my head.
Thank you, Mark, although that's a scary thing, but thank you.
Shannon, this is Mike. Just a quick question. So this is a plan, and you know, if we approve where we are now, but if there's changes that come up, there's nothing that the changes can be written into the plan even before policy is set. Is that true?
That's a good question. I foresee that we could amend this plan like we do any other plan through, you know, a public hearing process before the planning board and town council. We haven't typically needed to do that for our plans that don't, you know, it's not quite like our thoroughfare and collector street plan map or our transit routes. But if there was a need to amend the plan, we could do that through this process. And I think hopefully at that point we would have our housing advisory board in place to guide that process as well.
Okay, thank you. And maybe one other comment. So I think one of the public intent or comments that were made, they talked about the Durham plan. And just a question there, just for clarification, as the steering committee and the consultant, did you look at neighboring plans and review everything that was out there while you were putting this plan together?
So I'm sure that we haven't reviewed everything out there, but because there is a lot happening, but our expert consultant actually led the Wake County plan. They're working on Town of Cary's plan. I know that Diane and myself have been trying to stay up to speed through different trainings and groups on, you know, progress in the area. I've looked at Durham's work as well. So I can answer confidently that we, you know, are continuing to learn and keep up with progress in the area, and will continue to do so as part of plan implementation.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for the clarification. Anybody else on the planning board that want to make a comment? All right, hearing none, so we will, if there's additional comments that come in the next 24 hours, we'll read those into the record, and then we'll have a possible motion and vote on Wednesday afternoon for this item. If nobody has anything else. Yeah.
Oh, Chairman Marks, this is Diane.
Yeah.
I just wanted to let you all know we probably should have made this item the last item for public hearings, because on Wednesday Shannon has a conflict. It's her regular transit committee night. Okay. So if there was any way, if we could just let the public know that this could be the last public hearing that will be voted on Wednesday, okay, that would be helpful.
Yeah, I don't think I need to make a motion. We'll just move item number 1 on our Wednesday meeting will be voted on last. So it will be voted on after item number 4. So we will just, when we get to come to the meeting on Wednesday, item number 1 will just be delayed until the ending. That way Shannon can get on the call. So not a problem.
Thank you. We appreciate that.
Yep. Okay, if Sarah's out there, so we'll move on to item number 2, and this is a public hearing regarding rezoning case 20 CZ11, the Roberts Road property PUD. So Sarah, if you want to take the presentation away, thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Chair. Hopefully you guys have the slide for public hearing number 2.
Yep, we can. It's on the screen. You're good
Okay,
to go.
great. Thanks. So good evening. I'm going to be presenting rezoning case number 20CZ11 Roberts Road Properties PUD. We are looking at 3 properties located here in this general vicinity in Apex.
Sarah, I'm going to just interrupt real quick. So just remember to hit the slide number just so when you change slides.
Yes, thank you very much. This is my first virtual planning board, so I really do appreciate any guidance. I am currently on slide 25 for those of you following along. So as you'll see, slide 25, the subject properties are located here south of Roberts Road and east of Green Level Church Road. Moving to slide 26, we will zoom into an aerial shot of the subject properties. There are 3 properties located here at 7517 Roberts Road, 2310 Pollard Place, and 2000 Cabin Cove Road. This rezoning is being brought to you by Justin Michaela, Matthew and Michelle Michaela, Justin and Marianne Michaela, Matthew and Michelle Michaela, and Justin and Marianne Michaela. They are the owners and applicants for 10.54 acres located here. Again, south of Roberts Road. To the west, we have existing Crestmont neighborhood. To the east and south, we have the Pines at Wade Crossing. And over here to the north, in Carey's jurisdiction, we have Green Level High School. And I do want to just point out a few things setting the stage as we move along here. So Pollard Place, we have a street stub connection along the east side here. We also have another stub from Pollard Place along the west over here. Both of these existing street stubs are intended to provide future connectivity when this property develops consistent with UDO requirements. Moving on to slide number 27, the existing zoning of the site is rural residential. It is surrounded by medium density conditional zoning here to the west, Crestmont, and over here to the east and south with low density residential, and this is the Pines at Wake Crossing subdivision. Moving on to slide 28, the proposed rezoning is planned unit development conditional zoning. And on to slide number 29, the 2045 land use map has a designation of medium density residential consistent with recommended land use designation to the east, south, and west. Moving to slide 30, we will take a detailed look at the existing conditions. So as I pointed out, street stubs here from Pollard Place to the east and from the west as well. The subject properties located south of Roberts Road between Pines at Wake Crossing and Crestmont subdivisions. Green Level High School sits on the north side of Roberts Road. The properties are mostly wooded, containing single-family residences and accessory structures. The applicant conducted neighborhood meetings on September 28th and October 13th, 2020. The neighborhood meeting reports are attached in your packet. We have heard from Wake County Public School Systems. A letter of impact from Wake County Public School System was received for this rezoning and is included in your staff report packet. They have indicated that elementary, middle, and high schools within the current assignment area for this rezoning and development are anticipated to have insufficient capacity for future students. Transportation to schools outside of the current assignment area should be anticipated. School expansion or construction within the next 5 years is not anticipated to address these concerns. We will move now to slide 31, taking a look at the proposed PUD layout. So what we see here is a connection and extension of Pollard Place, both from the east and west. This will allow for internal street development off of that connection, which would allow for internal street network both to the north and south. The proposed uses and limitations are as follows. Single family with a minimum lot size of 6,000 square feet, townhomes and accessory apartments. Utilities minor. Recreational uses include park active, park passive, greenway, and recreational facility private. Maximum density for the project is 4.8 units per gross acre. The maximum number of lots is 50, 40 of those limited to single family, and a maximum of 10 townhome lots. The maximum building heights are 45 feet and limited to 3 stories. The proposed setbacks, both for single family, detached, and townhouse, are consistent with what we see in this area. The proposed buffers for the site to the west, south, and east are all a 10 type B. That is what is required and is proposed. Along the northern property boundary here, along Roberts Road, what is required is a 30-foot type B undisturbed and 50-foot type B disturbed. That is what they are proposing, with an additional buffer condition located in the RCA section, which I will now take us to. The Roberts Road Properties PUD is requesting to reduce the required percentage of resource conservation area to 25%. The current standard is 30%. This would amount to 2.64 acres of RCA based on UDO provisions. The 5% reduction from the standard 30% is being requested in exchange for the additional zoning conditions listed below. If council votes to approve the rezoning without the RCA reduction, then these zoning conditions shall not be included in the approval. So the following conditions, again, are tied to the RCA reduction. First, in addition to all single-family detached homes being pre-configured with conduit for a solar energy system, at least 8% of the total number of homes proposed in the master subdivision plan shall be built with solar PV systems installed at the time of construction. 2, this project shall be staged graded per section 7.2.5C. All single-family detached homes within this development shall be built with HVAC systems that meet or exceed a SEER seasonal energy efficiency rating of 18. The 30-foot type B thoroughfare buffer undisturbed along Roberts Road shall be increased to a 40-foot type B thoroughfare buffer undisturbed. In the case that this buffer must be disturbed, the width of the type B buffer shall increase from 40 feet to 60 feet. Evergreen trees shall be planted as a windbreak along the northern side of buildings where practical. Landscape design shall include pollinator-friendly flora in common areas. Landscape design shall include a minimum of 3 native hardwood species, and a pet waste station shall be installed at the mail kiosk or at the community center recreation site to be determined at the time of master subdivision plan. That concludes the RCA zoning conditions. And now we'll move on to affordable housing. If the town has a fund or other mechanism in place to receive donations to construct, subsidize, or participate in the development of affordable housing units, the developer will contribute $215 per lot to this fund prior to master subdivision final plat approval for each phase. In the event that the fund has not been established by the town of Apex, the money will be conveyed to a nonprofit organization participating in affordable housing. The developer will work with the town of Apex to identify a mutually acceptable nonprofit organization to receive these funds. Builder condition. In order to maintain a unique residential development, the subject properties shall not sell to a national builder. This condition shall be included in the deed. Moving on to slide number 32. The extension of public facilities. The sanitary sewer connection will come by connecting to existing sewer system in Pollard Place over here to the west from Crestmont subdivision, and water distribution service will be provided to this project by the connection to an existing 8-inch water line along Pollard Place to the west, as well as Pollard Place to the east. What is now in front of you are representative single-family elevations. The single-family detached residential architectural standards that are all listed out in your packet are fairly consistent with what we typically see. I will read out some of the additional ones, and that is that homeowner association covenants shall not restrict the construction of accessory dwelling units, and that all single-family detached homes shall be pre-configured with conduit for a solar energy system. Sorry, for those of you following at home, I had gone on to slide number 33. I'm now going to go to slide number 34, and these are the proposed townhouse elevations. Again, seeing all of our standard architectural conditions with a few to point out, and that is number 7 for townhome buildings with 3 units or more. The roof line cannot be a single mass and must be broken up horizontally and vertically between every unit. Number 9, maximum number of units per townhome building shall be limited to 4 units. And number 10, no townhomes shall be constructed along the western property line. And moving on to slide number 35, back to our PUD layout. There is a condition for existing structure preservation, and we're referring to the existing structure that was located, or that is still rather located here. Roberts Road Properties PUD shall include the preservation of the existing estate located at 2000 Cabin Cove Road in order to repurpose it as a community center recreation site, which will be owned and maintained by the HOA. Tree preservation condition. Prior to recording the first subdivision plat for the property, the developer will provide a donation of $1,600 to a local nonprofit organization with a mission toward tree preservation and replacement. In those portions of the site where trees are removed for single-family or townhome lots, the developer anticipates it can offset such removal by preserving 1.6 acres of existing tree canopy in other places on the site and replacing and replanting trees over 0.8 acre of the rest of the property. As such, this $1,600 donation represents an assigned per tree value in substitute canopy for the remainder of the property. The Parks and Rec Advisory Commission reviewed the Roberts Road Properties PUD with properties on December 9th, 2020. And the commission unanimously recommended a fee in lieu for recreation land dedication based on the number of units and types proposed at the time of master subdivision approval. The fee rate will be based on the rate of the current year when the town council approves the PUD. Planning staff recommends approval of 20 CZ 11 Roberts Road Properties PUD with conditions as proposed, with the exception. Oh, I'm sorry, before I get there, I apologize. I almost skipped over our transportation plan, access, and circulation. Again, my apologies. So as written in the PUD text, as proposed, Roberts Road Properties PUD will include the extension of public streets into the site from Pollard Place to the west, as well as Pollard Place to the east. There will be no direct vehicular access to Roberts Road. All public streets, with the exception of Pollard Place Extension, will have a 5-foot sidewalk on both sides of the street. The Pollard Place Extension will have an 8-foot side path on the north side of the road, connecting to the existing 8-foot side path along Gartrell Way. The future amenity center shall provide pedestrian connection to the existing pedestrian path on Gartrell Way, meaning that there will be sidewalk from that existing structure once it's repurposed along here. The project shall provide pedestrian access from the future subdivision to Roberts Road via the 8-foot side path along Pollard Place and Gartrell Way. The project will dedicate additional right-of-way along Roberts Road in the northeast corner to achieve a total of 40 feet for 1/2 of the Roberts Road right-of-way. So per our Apex Transportation Plan, Roberts Road being a thoroughfare, minor thoroughfare, requires an 80-foot right-of-way. So any additional right-of-way necessary to meet that will be provided. And a 5-foot public sidewalk shall be installed along the frontage of the project along Roberts Road prior to the first plat. And that is if the Town of Apex sidewalk project, which is intended to fill this gap, if for any reason that is delayed and this were to come first. That's not expected. However, should that be the case, this condition would ensure that that sidewalk gap is installed as part of this future development. So now I will go back to my planning staff recommendation. Thank you for your patience. Planning staff recommends approval of 20 CZ 11 Roberts Road Properties PUD with conditions as proposed, with the exception of the lack of direct pedestrian connection from future subdivision to Roberts Road, which is a thoroughfare. While Roberts Road Properties PUD is consistent with the thoroughfare and collector street plan, the PUD as proposed does not provide for direct pedestrian connection from the future subdivision to the thoroughfare Roberts Road as required in UDO section 74C sidewalks. Without the provision of the direct internal pedestrian connection to the thoroughfare, staff cannot recommend support of the Roberts Road Properties PUD as presented. The proposed rezoning to the PUD CZ zoning district is reasonable in that it is consistent with the 2045 land use map, which classifies the subject property as medium density residential. While the proposed rezoning allows for infill single-family residential development consistent and compatible with existing single-family residential development in the area, the proposed rezoning is not in the public interest because of the lack of a pedestrian connection between the future residential development and Roberts Road. That concludes my presentation. I will be happy to answer any questions that you may have at this time.
Okay, thanks, Sarah, for your first virtual meeting. You did good. Were there any public comments that came in last Friday or?
Yes, I do have a few here to read to you.
Okay, if you want to read those now, that'd be great.
Yes. All right. The first is from Manasa Nadapali. and please forgive me if I mispronounce the name. I have been working on these. As we have received it, hi planning team. This is regarding the proposed rezoning of properties on Roberts Road 20CZ11. I am the current resident at 267 Crestmont Ridge Drive, Apex, North Carolina 27523. This has been a great neighborhood for our family and neighbors for the past 4 years, and we are truly blessed. This community of 160 families, more than 100 kids are playing outside every day, several with young kids often playing on the cul-de-sac on Stonehouse Drive. It is not at all safety for kids. If you use our area for enter and exit, more traffic will increase. It's not a good idea. Please use Roberts Road for entry and exit for your coming community. While I support growth and development around our area, I have significant concern on the proposed development for 20CZ11 for the following reasons. 1, this set of lots are sandwiched between 2 existing communities, Crestmont and Pines at Wake Crossing, totaling 10.54 acres. It is mentioned that the plan is to build 50 new homes, mentioned on page 4 of PUD, dated October 2020. 3, one of the main access paths to this community will be Pollard Place, an extension to Stonehouse Drive, Crestmont neighborhood, which will result in increased traffic to our existing community that is already fully occupied. This will seriously impact the quality of life in our neighborhood. I request that the Town Planning Committee add an access to this proposed community via Roberts Road to ensure that the existing communities are not impacted due to this new construction. Next, from Pani Mamila Pali. Dear Town Planning Team, this is regarding the proposed zoning of properties on Roberts Road 20CZ11. I am the current resident at 2315 Fillmore Hall Lane, Apex, North Carolina 27523. This has been a great neighborhood for our family and neighbors for the past 4 years, and we are truly blessed to be a part of this community. This community of 160 families, several with young kids, often playing on the cul-de-sac on Stonehouse Drive, which will now be opened up to the new community for access through the Crestmont community. While I support growth and development around our area, I have a significant concern on the proposed development for 20CZ11 due to the following reasons. 1, the set of lots are sandwiched between 2 existing communities, Crestmont and Pines at Wake Crossing, totaling 10.54 acres. It is mentioned that the plan is to build 50 new homes, mentioned on page 4 of the PUD, October 2020. One of the main access paths to this community will be Pollard Place, an extension to Stonehouse Drive, Crestmont neighborhood, which will result in increased traffic to our existing community that is already fully occupied. This will seriously impact the quality of life in our neighborhood. Therefore, I request the Town Planning Committee to add a separate access to this new proposed community via Roberts Road to ensure that existing communities are not impacted due to this new construction. And next from Praveen Kanala. This is regarding proposed rezoning of properties on Roberts Road 20CZ11. I am the current resident at 318 Stonehouse Drive, Apex, North Carolina 27523. While I support growth and development around our area, I have significant concern on the proposed development for 20CZ11 for the following reasons. The set of lots are sandwiched between 2 existing communities, Crestmont and Pines at Wake Crossing, totaling 10.54 acres. It is mentioned that the plan is to build 50 new homes, mentioned on page 4 of PUD, dated October 2020. One of the main access paths to this community will be Pollard Place, an extension to Stonehouse Drive, which will result in increased traffic to our existing community that is already fully occupied. This will seriously impact the quality of life in our neighborhood. I request that the Town Planning Committee add an access to this new proposed community via Roberts Road to ensure that existing communities are not impacted due to this new construction. And last, from Rajesh Nadapalli, this is regarding proposed rezoning of properties on Roberts Road 20CZ11. I am the current resident at 268 Stonehouse Drive, Apex, North Carolina 27523. While I support growth and development around our area, I have significant concern on the proposed development for 20CZ11. One of the main access paths to this community will be Pollard Place, an extension to Stonehouse Drive, Crestmont neighborhood, which will result in increased traffic to our existing community that is already fully occupied. This will seriously impact the quality of life in our neighborhood. Therefore, I request that the Town Planning Committee add an access to this new proposed community via Roberts Road to ensure that existing communities are not impacted due to this new construction. And last, from Rajesh Nadapalli, This is regarding the proposed zoning of properties on Roberts Road, 20CZ11. I am representing the Crestmont neighbors who have signed a letter regarding the same, which is attached below. Address for the record is 267 Crestmont Ridge Drive, Apex, North Carolina, 2723. And the attachment reads, "We are proud residents of Crestmont neighborhood at Apex, which has been our home for several years. The community of 160 families, several with young kids, often playing on the cul-de-sac on Stonehouse Drive. While we fully support growth and development around our area, we have significant concerns on the proposed development 420CZ11 for the following reasons. The set of lots are sandwiched between two existing communities, Crestmont and Pines at Wake Crossing, totaling 10.54 acres. It is mentioned that the plan is to build 50 new homes. Page 4 of PUD, dated October 2020. One of the main access paths to this community will be Pollard Place, an extension to Stonehouse Drive, Crestmont neighborhood, which will result in increased traffic to our existing community that is already fully occupied. This will seriously impact the quality of life in our neighborhood. We request that the Town Planning Committee add a direct access to the new proposed community via Roberts Road to ensure that existing communities are not impacted due to this new construction." There's then reference to the interactive development link for the rezoning petition, and the following families have expressed the above concern and signed the letter. Thank you, Crestmont neighbors. That concludes emails we have received thus far.
Okay. Thank you, Sarah. Is the applicant online, and do they wish to make a statement?
Yes, I am here. I do have a
state your name and address, and so just so we know who's speaking, please.
Sure. Hey everyone, my name is Patrick Kiernan with Jones and Connaughton Engineering, located at 221 North Salem Street in downtown Apex, and I am here representing the Michaela family for this PUD proposal for the Roberts Road Properties PUD. First and foremost, I'd like to give a huge shout out to Sarah, Amanda, and the rest of the town staff for their help in getting us to this point. This PUD has a lot of unique aspects, and they were absolutely critical in helping us navigate this process, especially when it comes to the RCA reduction condition, which, as I understand, is unprecedented. I don't think I need to rehash Sarah's whole summary, as I think she did an excellent job touching on every aspect of this PUD. But I would like to point out a few changes that we will actually be making to our PUD proposal. And there are 5 changes in all. Some of these are in response to some of the neighbor concerns that we've received in the last week. A couple others are in response to feedback that we have actually received from the town council. So here at the finish line, we're trying to be flexible and accommodate, any last second concerns. So these 5 changes are as follows. Number 1, the maximum residential density for the project will be reduced to 3.2 units per acre with a maximum of 25 single-family homes and 8 townhomes. This amounts to a max yield of 33 total residential units, down from the original proposal of 50 residential units with a maximum of 40 single-family and 10 townhomes. Number 2, the following condition is being added. Quote, the location of the temporary gravel construction entrance shall be limited to only provide construction access from Pollard Place to the east via Gartrell Way. This condition is intended to prevent construction traffic from utilizing the residential streets within the Crestmont subdivision to the west, which has many more homes fronting on those streets, several 90-degree turns, and it's a much farther distance. So this is in response to one neighbor's complaints or concerns, rather, that construction traffic could be cutting through that residential neighborhood. Alternatively, having the construction entrance on Gartrell Way is a much closer access to Roberts Road. It is a much more defined entrance exit for the Pines at Wake Crossing subdivision has a wider right of way, and most importantly, there are no residential lots which front on it. So from what it sounds like, this would have been something that would have been incorporated into the subdivision plan later on down the road. But I think it was appropriate to go ahead and add it as a zoning condition in order to alleviate any concerns of the contrary. Number 3, the following condition is being removed. And this was one in the single family architectural conditions that Sarah did not read out loud. It was one of the typical ones that she had alluded to. But like I said, this condition is being removed. Quote, all single family homes shall have a crawl space or a raised foundation that at a minimum rises at least 20 inches from average grade across the front of the house to the finished floor level at the front door. Removing this condition is intended to provide flexibility in the case that a homeowner wants to choose an architectural option that does not include steps to get into the front door. These are often called slab on grade, and this is typically a style used that you'll see in senior living communities. With the condition as previously proposed, a slab on grade option would be prohibited, meaning all homes must have at least a 20-inch rise in the foundation. And the purpose for removing the condition is just for, if in the future, if one of these homeowners wants the option of aging in place, they can propose a finished floor foundation basically at the same grade as the sidewalk that leads to it. Number 4, the builder condition that restricts the PUD from being sold to a national builder has been revised to state the following. This project shall consist of lots developed with custom homes. The intent of this condition is to portray the desire for custom-built homes in the neighborhood rather than specifically exclude national builders. We understand there could be a negative connotation found in such a condition. That was certainly not the intent. So we just believe that this language is more appropriate, and we would like to propose this change. Last but not least, number 5. The condition regarding pedestrian access to Roberts Road is being revised to say the following. The project shall provide pedestrian access from the future subdivision to Roberts Road via the 8-foot side path along Pollard Place and Gartrell Way, unless a public street within the subdivision is constructed within 300 feet of the northwest property corner, in which case a direct pedestrian connection shall be made to Roberts Road, consistent with UDO section 7.5.4.c. So, as you just heard, this is the one condition that the town is not able to support at this time because it does not meet the UDO in entirety. Our reason for this condition is because the developers would prefer not to have a sidewalk creating a gap in the thoroughfare buffer along Roberts Road, which will adversely impact the effect of the buffer as it relates to visual and sound impacts from Roberts Road. As we have, previously portrayed, we are, very, interested in a nice large buffer along Roberts Road. We have the condition in the RCA reduction that will provide an additional 10 feet. So, that buffering is very important to the developers, and that sidewalk connection creates what it does. It creates a 10-foot gap for the easement, which is just a 10-foot gap in any landscaping or potential fencing that would provide screening from Roberts Road, a thoroughfare. Now, let me find my place here. So in a scenario where the internal street network for this project is designed along the eastern side of the project, closer to Gartrell Way, we believe the direct pedestrian connection to Roberts Road is redundant given the close proximity to Gartrell Way and its connection to Roberts Road. So the reason for adding the clause at the end of this condition is because we understand that in a scenario where, our layout may change and we have a public street available somewhere in the northwest corner of the project, we understand that that corner is obviously the farthest away from Pollard Place and Gartrell Way, and we believe that the advantages of that pedestrian connection would merit the construction of this direct pedestrian connection to Roberts Road. So this clause is simply, sort of a meet in the middle, if you will. And this was a recommendation from one of the council members that, in a scenario where, if our layout provides a street within, proximity, that we will make that connection. So understanding that, we obviously would like to get on the same page as the town on this clause. We simply feel that the negatives outweigh the positives of adding it, unless, like I said, we have a street available in that corner. Other than these changes, I just wanted to repeat my appreciation for your time and consideration. Repeat my appreciation for Sarah and the town staff. And I am available if anybody has any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick. So I guess since Patrick's kind of on the line, anybody on the board have any questions for Patrick or clarifications?
This is Tina. I have a question, I think, for both Patrick and for Sarah, and I'm not sure. Sarah, I'm not sure if you can answer, and so Patrick, I'm looking to you also for answers. So my first one is with the reduction in homes. I'm curious as to if this would affect Wake County Public Schools recommendation. That was kind of my first concern, that there was in their letter, they stated that there was insufficient space to accommodate additional students in all three grades, elementary, middle, and high school, within a new subdivision. So I'm wondering if the change in the numbers will help affect that. So that was question number one. And I do have a large. As I was looking at the staff packet, I didn't see. It looked like neighbors did not contribute originally, and so we kind of heard some of that in the comments. I just want to make sure I didn't miss that. And if so, the neighbors that did contribute obviously expressed concern about the access coming in through the two neighborhoods. And I have concerns about that as well. I'm wondering if it's possible to have that Roberts Road, you just spoke about, Patrick, having a pedestrian access, but I'm also wondering about what about a vehicular access coming off Roberts Road to help alleviate some of those concerns. Thank you.
Sure. Tina, this is Sarah. So first, for the Wake County Schools impact, we have not presented them with the reduced numbers. This is something that the applicant has presented this evening. So we certainly can try to reach out to them between now and when y'all meet and vote on Wednesday and see if that changes. So that's first. Second, in one of the zoning conditions regarding access is not to have the direct vehicular access to Roberts Road, and this is supported by staff. And the reason being is that the existing site, existing full movement access here, there's a existing full movement access here to the school, and then the other one over here in Crestmont. Because it's a thoroughfare, it requires 500 feet of spacing measured center line to center line from those access points. And it is just not physically possible to get 500 feet of separation in here. So that is a condition that is supported by staff, not to have the full movement vehicular access on Roberts Road.
Sarah, just a clarifying question. So it sounds like no matter what the development would be in this space, there would not be an allowance at all for a road there because of that 500 foot.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Hey, Sarah, this is
Tommy. Was any thought given to just making it like a right in, right out there? Because that spacing is like half. I think it's like 250 maybe.
Hey, yeah, this is Patrick. I can chime into that. A right-in, right-out was originally considered. We proposed that to the town staff, and again, based on spacing requirements. So you're right that physically the spacing is there, but what you get into with the right-in, right-out is because Roberts Road is a thoroughfare, there would likely be a exclusive right turn lane required for that right-in, right-out, and that would overlap basically with the turn lane. I think the turn lane going into the school. We had looked into it, and the spacing just wasn't there. I had gone over this with Russell Dalton from the engineering department, and he and I were on the same page that a right in, right out. The only place it would have been possible would have been all the way in the northwest corner, but it wasn't physically. It just wasn't possible to make that connection.
Okay.
And for what it's worth, oh, excuse me, Reggie. I'm sorry about that, sir.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say, for what it's worth, our from our side of things, our original idea, we would have loved to have a connection to Roberts Road and to not make the connection to Pollard Place. On the other end, that was kind of the idea of the community from the get-go. But obviously, from day one, it was made, abundantly clear that regardless of what the rezoning or what the development was going to be, the street network really sort of is set in stone, if you will.
Sure. Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I think if you had that right in, right out, you could at least reduce part of that traffic in there. But either way, they're not affecting the cul-de-sac. So, okay, thanks.
Hey, this is Mark. I have been spending some time while you guys were talking about traffic, looking at a Google map, and I zoomed in, and I just want to make an observation that maybe the rest of the board can maybe spend 2 minutes looking at between now and Wednesday. It looks to me like if you zoom out a little bit, if people want to go east, they're not going to cut through Crestmont. They're going to go out on what's that other street over here to the right? Yeah, they're going to go west. They're going to go west, and if they're going to go west on Roberts, they're going to go out to the west. If they're going to go south, they're going to go out to the west and then go on Pollard, and then take a right and go down Parlor to catch Green Level Church down there. Otherwise, they're cutting through all sorts of maze. But there is going to be a portion that people want to go, like head up to Panther Creek, and they want to go north of that. Then yeah, they're going to come out, and if they're on the left side of this development, they're going to cut through Crestmont. So, but I think by reducing the total number of houses, if we can kind of visualize if the traffic sort of is going to flow in 3 or 4 directions, really only one of those directions is going to cut through. It will change the quality of life for these people that have been treating this street that was originally planned to come through on Pollard like a big long cul-de-sac. I can understand their disappointment, but they had to have known that that street was planned, or they should have known.
Yeah, I mean, one other thing about, turning left from Crestmont onto Roberts in a school during school traffic, it would be a challenge. So they might just scoot down to that Cobbleton Way, which is on what is that, Green Level? Yeah, Green Level, and take a right.
Yep.
But I mean, they might split the difference, and it might not be quite as much traffic through that neighborhood.
Yep.
So this is Reggie Skinner. I've got some questions as well. I mean, what is emergency services saying as far as having to do cut-throughs through either of these neighborhoods to get access to this proposed development? 1, and 2, why couldn't we just use Gautreaux Way as the entrance into that neighborhood in that northwest corner? I mean, you already got a curb cut there with a miniature island for flow of traffic.
Sarah, I am happy to answer this unless you would rather take it. I don't know if Russell Dalton is on this call or not, but I know he had some thoughts on this as well.
Yes, perfect segue. Thank you, Patrick. I actually saw Russell had raised his hand at some point during this transportation discussion. So Russell, can I pass the baton to you?
Yeah, I think my understanding is where you see that median breakup on Guardrail Way, we don't actually have dedicated right-of-way to the west. So you can't actually make a connection there. The connection would have to come in at Pollard Place where the right-of-way is stubbed out. And looking at the layout, the traffic that's wanting to use, that's wanting to use Gartrell Way based on this, if you had a direct connection to Roberts, I don't see that being much of a benefit to Crestmont one way or the other, because Gartrell Way is so close and it's such a direct route to Roberts Road. I would expect, not a lot of value. And like Patrick had explained, we looked at geometric issues out there on Roberts Road, and it violates a number of our concerns, with having a connection across from the school driveway too close to Gartrell Way. So I would say, the connection with Pollard Place is a pretty convenient route for people to get to and from Roberts Road, with turn lanes already provided at that location.
So Russell, can you answer Reggie's question? Because I had the same question. What if this development only could come in on Pollard from Gartrell and not the the west side rather?
Well, I mean, part of our goal in developing, neighborhoods is to connect neighborhoods, and that was the intent with Pollard Place. Hence, the name Pollard Place on both ends. So, when we don't connect, we intentionally stub streets and then refuse to connect later because, one neighborhood decides that they're there first and they don't want connectivity. It causes a number of problems. It forces more traffic out to the thoroughfare. It gives people less options. It creates more issues for our, services. We provide garbage and other services where we have to run between neighborhoods. It makes, puts more trips on the thoroughfare where actually, safety is more of an issue with people making turns on and off higher speed roadways. So just general practice with planning that's supported by the UDO is to connect streets, and that's why we would connect this east-west street.
Yes, so, and that's exactly right, Russell. Our UDO requirements that if there is an existing stub, that it does connect to future development. So per the UDO, we are required to make these connections here. And just to further clarify, yes, this area right here, and it is kind of hard to see, is actually RCA, and it's part of the HOA for the Pines at Wake Crossing, and it is not available for the right of way to have any connection here.
This is Tina. I will say, oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. You hadn't finished, Reggie. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
So Russell, just so I'm clear, we're expecting traffic to come off of Roberts through Gartrell. Is that the goal here? Or are they really going to go around to what was the other street, Crestmore?
Well, and it may depend on the layout of the neighborhood, because if you look at, depending on how they propose it, if they're for people who access Pollard Place closer to Gartrell Way, there's going to be a lot of incentive for them to go up that way versus trying to wind their way through Crestmont. If you have an access really close to the Stonehouse Drive end, some of those people might want to go out to Roberts Road that direction if they're going to Roberts Road. So it's hard to predict every individual trip, but that's part of connecting neighborhoods is to provide opportunities for people to go different routes. And in this case, you've already got, you're right adjacent to a roadway that's not driveway loaded, that provides convenient access. And I think most people who want to go to Roberts Road are going to use Gartrell Way.
So if I hear you correctly, or if I'm understanding this right, emergency services as well as any of our regular services for garbage and recycling are going to come in Gartrell Way.
Well, I mean, they circulate through neighborhoods, so I can't guarantee like what their route would necessarily be. I mean, they may come in through Crestmont and then go toward that direction, or they may go back the other way. I mean, they have to establish routes. So the one thing connectivity provides them is flexibility to optimize routes to connect between neighborhoods.
Right. But with a major thoroughfare, I would say EMT, fire, and police were going to come across Roberts. They're not going to snake through Laurel and Turning Way to get to Gartrell.
Yeah, one benefit of the Crestmont neighborhood layout is it is kind of broken up. It's a circuitous route to get through, so that actually is good, just sort of built-in traffic calming to discourage, cut through traffic. And people who do try to cut through, would have to, it helps to control speed somewhat when you have to make that many turns through the neighborhood to get to the thoroughfare.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
This is Tina. I think just for the record, I understand that, and let me say full disclosure, I live on a stub road with full understanding that it may be a full road one day. I think that, you know, as we're looking at properties and as we're looking at the UDO and stub streets, I think we want to give maybe more consideration to how this affects the quality of life of our neighbors. You know, this is definitely not the first and will not be the last community that comes before us in which there was a stub street or we're going through a neighborhood. And it's, you know, it is disruptive to the neighbors. So I think that this is something we want to give consideration of as it relates to what it looks like in the UDO and how it affects communities that are being planned going forward. It does not necessarily affect this community because of how the UDO is currently written, but I just give us caution and pause as we think about this. Obviously, you know, we can say folks should know, they should know. Again, I fought on a stub street, I do know. But it, you know, when you have an entire neighborhood that's developed, we've just had this more than once since I've been here, in which we're you know, traffic is going to change, behaviors of neighbors, children, where they play, all of that is going to change because of filling in a neighborhood. I think we want to give a little bit more thought and a consideration. Maybe that needs to be reflected in the UDO.
I have some questions, if I may go.
Yeah.
Russell, does Pollard Place, which currently has no sidewalk, will this development be required to extend sidewalk to Stonehouse Drive? Or maybe so.
Sorry, there is existing sidewalk on Pollard Place here.
Maybe I'm missing it.
Yeah, I think that might be my fault. This is Patrick again. The plans as we put them together, the survey just did not show the sidewalk over there, and I did not think to look for it. The aerial that we were going off of the sidewalk wasn't built yet, so it wasn't until I saw one of Sarah and Russell's versions of this map that is much more updated. You can now see that the sidewalk is available along that west side, so that connection will be made.
This is Mark. This might be redundant, but I may be asking the same question, but when I zoom in on Google Maps, which is not always up to date, my question is there's about, 100 feet of unsidewalked Pollard Place that attaches to the street we were just talking about, Stonehouse. So it looks like there's no sidewalk in that development. So my question is will the developer of what we're approving Wednesday, will that developer have to extend the sidewalk out all the way to Stonehouse?
This is Russell. It's actually, I'm looking at the near map image. It's actually on the north side. They have sidewalk all the way to Stonehouse Drive already. Okay,
good. Thank you.
And during the presentation, Sarah, did you mention that there is a town plan to connect guardrail sidewalk to the Crestmont stub along Roberts Road? And if that project doesn't go forward, that the applicant has committed to making that connection or along the Roberts Road frontage?
Correct. So if the sidewalk gap here along Roberts Road is not installed by the town, then this future subdivision would install that sidewalk, yes. And that is included in the PUD.
Sarah, just to be clear, that's considered a side path there, not a sidewalk?
So along along Roberts Road, it would be to complete the sidewalk here. What the applicant has proposed is that there's an 8-foot side path right now along Guardrail Way, and that 8-foot side path would be along the north side of the Pollard Place extension.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Any other comments or questions for staff or the applicant?
I have a few comments to the applicant, Patrick. First, I appreciate the removal of the 20-foot above grade. I struggled because we just listened to such a great presentation on housing affordability and the need, and then I saw this presentation. I'm like, oh my gosh, like half of these are directly against that, but this one I think actually helps housing affordability and allows aging in place, which I think is something we heard and saw as in the comment section of the affordability plan. So I think that's great. It's allowing more age-targeted product in this community, which is needed. The builder restriction comment was kind of weird. I mean, it's up to the applicant, but I didn't see why. I mean, I get custom homes, but you know, some national builders build very nice homes too. The pedestrian access to Roberts Road, I think like most of the developments that I see, and I run in Apex, and I live next to Lake Castleberry, where the sidewalk was, I think they did a fee in lieu along Wimberley and Green Level. And I'll be honest with you, I wish they installed it, because the short-sightedness was now people that are part of the community, we don't have a direct access, and now like we're trying to find loops to go running without, you know, going down Wimberley Road. In this case, I mean, people that you're building, up to 33 units, they may want to connect out to Roberts Road and utilize the street side trail or the sidewalk. So I feel like in 40 feet, you could meander a 5-foot sidewalk and still keep the opacity of your buffer with relatively little impact to the development. I think that would appease a lot of the adjacent neighbors, and I think that the development would be better for it. So I would like to see that consideration made. That's all.
And Ryan, to your point, it's hard to see on this aerial here, but there is a direct pedestrian connection from this cul-de-sac to Roberts Road, and that is consistent with the existing UDO requirement. So it's really hard to see right there, but it does exist.
Ryan, if I could, this is Patrick again. One other point that I would like to make, and it's more of a general point with this PUD, and I think I failed to mention it earlier. One thing that is unique about this is that the Michaela family, the developers, they're going to live in this neighborhood. So this community right now, the Michaela family is planning, essentially, they have several branches of their family that are relocating down to Apex. So right now the plan is for all these lots to remain within the family. Now, obviously, there's no restrictions on second generation or resale of the homes or anything. So there's no conditions that relate to this. And I understand, some of these conditions we can't always put something in for now when it's a perpetual condition. But that was really, to your point about the short-sightedness about some of these sidewalk connections, I 100% agree with you. Normally, but in this scenario, the sidewalk connection, if it were made, in our eyes, the benefit of that connection would be for the residents of this subdivision. However, if the developer, knowing the intent of this subdivision, and the future residents of the subdivision, at least for the foreseeable future, if the desire, on our end is to not have the sidewalk, plus, it has all these negative effects from the buffers and everything. That's why we kind of came up with this condition. Our idea at this moment, there are several families within this family that have small children. One layout that is being considered is a cul-de-sac sort of in that northeast corner, which is why we were kind of alluding to such a layout. And the idea, one of the neighbors mentioned it in their emails, their children play in the cul-de-sac. So that was essentially the reason, small children are going to be playing in the cul-de-sac. They have an idea already of who is going to be occupying those lots, and they know that those residents do not want that connection made. That's why, this is the condition that we would like to move forward with. Obviously, it's not something worth jeopardizing the entire project over. But that's kind of the long and short of, the origin of this. It wasn't just kind of pulled out of the blue.
Thank you.
Sarah, this is Mike. Just a question. So with the adjustment to the new proposal or the new condition on number 5, how does staff consider that now? Before you were opposed to this plan, but with the kind of the revised condition that the applicant made, does that make a difference?
Patrick, which one's number 5?
Regarding the sidewalk, the direct pedestrian connection. So the clause where if a street is constructed within 300 feet of the northwest property corner, then that pedestrian connection would be made to Roberts Road.
And I don't want to put you on the spot right now. If staff needs, we have until Wednesday. So if you want time to think about it, we can have further discussion on.
Sure, I think it's an increased condition to get closer to the UDO requirement. However, from a literal standpoint, it still does not meet the intent of the UDO. And just something to point out, that even if we were talking about, and I'm just going to say roughly here, to have someone go from here out to the Pollard Place extension, down to Gartrell Way, come back up and come over here, you're looking at an additional quarter mile that you would have a pedestrian need to walk to make that connection. So really, and it is kind of hard without a street network, which we would get to at subdivision plan, but depending on where these streets are laid out, it has the potential to increase the pedestrian distance traveled at least a quarter of a mile, if not more.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions or comments or discussion before we close out and come back on Wednesday? All right, hearing none, I think we'll close this, and like I said, we'll have the possible motion and vote on the 13th at 5 o'clock. And Sarah, looks like you are still up for a public hearing regarding rezoning case 220CZ13, Humiola Farm Assembly.
Yes, thank you, Chairman Marks. And on to public hearing number 3, rezoning case 20CZ13, Humiola Farm Assembly. And I am on slide number 37 for those of you following at home. We are going to be talking about another 3 subject properties located in this general vicinity on the south side of Humiola Road and east of Olive Chapel Road. Moving to slide number 38, we will zoom in here on the subject properties. This is being brought to us by Bill Zahn with Humiola Associates, owned by Humiola Farm LLC, or rather, that is the owner bringing this forward. The location of the properties are 0 and 8633 Humiola Road. And as you can see here, we are looking at an existing residential structure, barn, and other related existing structures. Important things to keep in mind is that there is a overhead utility easement that is going to run along Humiola Road with a power pole in this general vicinity and continues along Humiola Road. Over here to the east and south is the recently approved Pud. So just wanted to set the stage for y'all. And we will now transition to slide number 39. The existing zoning of the property is Wake County Residential R40W. It is surrounded by like zoning to the southwest and north, and to the east we have the PUD conditional zoning, and that again is the Heelan PUD that was approved late last year. On to slide 40. The proposed zoning is a low density residential conditional zoning. On to slide 41. The 2045 land use map has a recommended designation of low density residential surrounded by the lake with a recreation mixed use activity center over here at the intersection of Humiola Road and New Hill Olive Chapel Road. Whoops. Apologies. Moving on to slide number 42. The properties to be rezoned are located on the south side of Humiola Road, approximately 800 feet east of New Hill Olive Chapel Road. 2 of the properties are vacant, and the other contains a single-family residence, barn, accessory structures, and pond. There are 2 small streams that traverse the developed property. The applicant conducted a neighborhood meeting on October 27th, 2020. That meeting report is attached in your packet. We also heard from Wake County Public Schools. Their letter of impact indicated that elementary and high schools within the current assignment area for this rezoning and development are anticipated to have insufficient capacity for future students. Transportation to schools outside of the current assignment area should be anticipated. School expansion or construction within the next 5 years is not anticipated to address these concerns. As noted on the 2045 land use map, the subject property request to low density residential conditional zoning is consistent with the 2045 recommendation for low density residential. The proposed uses include single family, family care home, accessory apartment, utility minor, park active, park passive, greenway, and recreation facility private. There is a list of 20 zoning conditions, and I will highlight those that are unique, all others being standard with single family residential proposes. Number 1, the project density will not exceed 3 dwelling units per acre. A maximum number of units is 56 dwelling units. A minimum lot size shall be 5,865 square feet. Number 2, the project will provide a minimum of 2 access points if over 50 residential lots are proposed. The project shall be accessed on Humiola Road, and a stub provided to the east here, consistent with the location of stub streets approved in the Heelan PUD or as agreed upon with the Town of Apex Planning and Transportation staff during subdivision plan review and approval. Number 4, the setbacks do correspond with the approved Heelan PUD, and you'll find that they are consistent with that. Number 5, the project will provide sidewalk on both sides of all internal streets. Number 12, all homes shall be pre-configured with conduit for a solar energy system. Number 13, homeowners association covenants shall not restrict construction of any accessory dwelling unit. Number 18, existing deciduous trees greater than 18 inches in diameter that are removed by site development shall be replaced by planting a 1.5-inch caliper native tree from the Town of Apex Design and Develop Manual, either on-site or at an alternative site location approved by town planning staff above and beyond the standard UDO requirements. Number 19, the overhead electric easement along Humiola Road shall be counted toward the required RCA and buffer standards as identified within various UDO sections. The buffer is proposed to be an average width buffer of 50 feet. The buffer shall be planted to a type B buffer standard along the Humiola Road frontage. And 20, left turn lanes meeting NCDOT requirements shall be provided on Humiola Road for each proposed point of access where left turn movements are proposed if permitted by NCDOT. Planning staff recommends approval of rezoning 20CZ13 Yumiwara Farm Assembly as proposed by the applicant. And I will be happy to take any questions at this time.
All right, thank you, Sarah. I guess, was there any public comments that were read in or called in?
No, so there's no public comments at this time.
Okay. And is the applicant online and wish to make a statement?
Good evening, Mr. Chair. Jeff Roach, Peak Engineering and Design. I would like to make a statement. Can you guys hear me okay?
We can. Jeff, go ahead.
Okay, awesome, guys. Thank you, everybody. Again, Jeff Roach, Peak Engineering, 1125 Apex Peakway here in Apex. I'm here tonight on behalf of Bill Zahn of Humiola of Associates. Unfortunately, Mr. Zahn is not able to be here with us tonight. He's got a family COVID matter that they are dealing with a sick kid. So I am stepping up and helping him with the presentation this evening. Also on the phone tonight with me is Craig Dewar. Craig is with Land Alternatives, also helping Mr. Zahn kind of land plan this whole deal. I think you guys have seen Craig in front of you over the past couple of years, so you may know Craig well. He is here to answer any questions. I don't think we really need him to make a presentation and take additional time. It's already 7 o'clock or 6:30, so I'll try to be brief here and go through this and then answer any questions at the end. I'm not going to rehash all the items that Sarah went over. She touched on the main issues out here. I do want to kind of poke around at a couple of them, specifically the 2045 land use map with the low density conditional zoning request is in keeping with the adopted plan. As Sarah just brought up there, the 3 parcels are there. They are kind of, this project is taking its feed from the Heelan project with building setbacks. We are agreeing to the 50-foot buffer along Humiola Road. A 30-foot buffer is what's required, but with the character of the area and what Heelan had previously agreed to next door, we saw it as a reasonable, kind of keep the projects almost looking similar to one another. So we have agreed to that. If you read that condition number, let me double check which number it is, condition number 19. It's kind of a weird language in relationship to the 50-foot buffer. There is an existing overhead Duke Power easement along the frontage that comes into the property at one location. It's about 65 feet into the property. So with right-of-way dedication and that existing easement there, we wanted to avoid a future Board of Adjustment hearing. So we added this language into our condition as we try to convert that line from a Duke line to an Apex line, or at least to an easement swap. That'll make it a little bit easier on everybody, but we are committing to the type B buffer, average width of 50 feet, just allowing to have that overhead power line easement in there to count. Tree replacement condition, we have been talking to a couple of the council members, you guys probably know who, and have agreed to that. The previous zoning also went through the 0 entry homes, removing the 20-inch step. We've also agreed to that with one kind of caveat to that is that these homes will be probably a little bit big. I say bigger. They could be the same size, could be smaller or bigger. The idea being is that we've committed to it. If a first floor master suite is provided only, will we remove the 20-inch step up to the first floor? This is for 3,000 square foot homes and up. Maximum number of lots based on the zoning, 3 units an acre is 56 units. We expect it to be somewhere right around that, maybe a hair under it. 2 other real things, quick things I want to point out. One is the transportation plan. We are actually going to be constructing a 10-foot wide side path along Humiola from our eastern boundary with Heeland to our western boundary up against the Bryant Olive piece in the upper left-hand corner of the visual that you have open right now. I will also tell you in our conversations with one of the council members, we're actually reaching out to the property owner next door to the west, that skinny piece that Sarah is hovering over right there. We are reaching out to him to ask about extending that 10-foot side path to his westerly boundary. We don't have any way to force him to do it. We are simply asking it. If he agrees to give up the easement, then our developer owner has agreed to build that extra, I think it's about 50 feet of side path, getting closer to that mixed use node over there on New Hill Olive Chapel Road at Humiola. So trying to do that, trying to really get a lot of things happening out in this area, pedestrian connectivity wise. And in summary, the project complies with the 10 standard outlined items in the zoning application, including compliance with the 2045 plan, compliance with surrounding land uses, supplemental standards, minimization of impacts on a various number of topics: noise, sound, environmental features, adjacent properties, protection of surrounding properties, is not a nuisance, and finally, it'll follow the UDO standards expressly written outside of our zoning request, expressly written within the UDO. With that, I will save the rest of your evening, and I will be here to answer questions, but I would like to ask for your support tonight, or actually Wednesday night, I suppose, in the vote. And I am here, as well as Craig Dewar with Land Alternatives, to answer any questions that you guys may have of us. I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Mr. Roach. So we'll bring it back to the board, kind of close the public hearing. Any comments, questions for either the applicant or Sarah?
Chairman, I do have a question for either Mr. Roach or Ms. Van Every. The commitment on tree replacement, is the applicant allowed by ordinance, given the precedent set by Depot 499, to use street trees to augment tree canopy?
Sarah, we haven't gone through that yet. So Mr. Akers, I don't have an answer for you, but I will find out before we get in front of town council. I may even try to find out before Wednesday's meeting.
I was just something, if you, I'm trying to see it as a help, like not necessarily that you would have to do it, but it would be an allowable alternative to planning offsite. But if you can get trees in the right of way, I mean, that's kind of new precedent in Apex, which I think is some of the direction that council would like to see. So it would be an option, I would think.
I appreciate you pointing that out. And actually, if you look at the property, there are very few trees on it. And the layout that Craig and I have worked on extensively tries to save as many of those trees along the southern boundary as possible. So we're actually looking at this site, possibly not even cutting down any 18-inch trees, specimen trees as required, except for a stub to the south into Heelan and a stub to the east into Heelan. Other than that, we're trying to save as many trees in the back as we can, Mr. Akers. So I appreciate that feedback and that option for tree replacement.
Thanks.
Thanks, Ryan. Anybody else? Comments, questions? All right, hearing none. So I think, thank you, Jeff, and thank you, Sarah, for the presentation. We will bring this back for a possible motion and vote on Wednesday.
Thank you, Mr. Marks. Have a great evening.
Okay, thank you. Next up, Lauren, are you ready? This is public hearing regarding rezoning case 20 CZ 15, the Smithfield Road Collision Center.
Yes, sir. This is slide 43 for the folks that are listening at home. This is public hearing number 4, rezoning case 20 CZ 15 for Smithfield Road Collision Center. On page 44, you'll find the overall context map to show that the properties are located in the southern area of Apex and north of Holly Springs. On slide 45, you'll see the aerial that shows the portion of the subject properties to be rezoned that are a total of 3.816 acres and are located on the west side of Highway 55 bypass, south of NC 540 highway, and east of Wake County landfill. These properties are proposed to be rezoned. One is in the corporate limits, which is the northern portion, and one is in the ETJ, which is the southern portion. Both properties are vacant and wooded with a stream located generally along the common property line. On page 46 of the zoning districts, the portion of the property is currently zoned high density single family, the northern portion. The southern portion is zoned rural residential. The adjacent zonings are to the north, high density single family, to the east, high density single family and residential, and to the south we have Holly Springs residential 15, and to the west we have light industrial with a small little portion of high density single family. On slide 47, you'll see the zoning districts proposed. The applicant is proposing to rezone both properties to light industrial conditional zoning. On slide 48, you'll see the 2045 land use map. The 2045 land use map identifies the subject properties as industrial employment. The proposed rezoning to light industrial conditional zoning is consistent with that land use classification. On slide 49, we are back at the aerial. The applicant conducted neighborhood meetings on October 29th, 2020 and December 10th, 2020, and both copies of the neighborhood reports are in your packet. A full listing of the proposed uses are included on page 2 of the staff report, but I'd like to list out a few of the 62 uses that are being proposed, such as repair services limited, automotive accessory sales and installation, repair and maintenance general, building supply wholesale, general and manufacturing, and processing. The applicant has provided 3 architectural conditions related to non-residential uses that we've typically see. There is a tweak to a couple of the wording, but it's overall what we've seen. And then zoning condition number 4, which states a 100-foot riparian buffer shall be provided for all perennial streams in accordance with the requirements of UDO section 6.1 as of November 2nd, 2020. This zoning condition is proposed due to these properties being located in the Middle Creek Basin. The 4 proposed zoning conditions can be found on page 2 as well, if you'd like to reference back. Approval of the rezoning is reasonable because the proposed light industrial conditional zoning district is consistent with the 2045 land use plan and other adopted plans. The 2045 land use map classifies the subject properties as industrial employment, which includes light industrial conditional zoning. The proposed rezoning is reasonable and in the public interest because it will allow for the development of non-residential uses that are consistent with the surrounding properties, especially those to the west. It will also encourage compatible development of the property and increase the tax base. Planning staff can recommend approval with the conditions as offered by the applicant. I'm available for questions, as well as Mr. Spencer Terry, who is on the Teams call as well. And thank you.
Sorry, I was unmuted. Lauren, was there any public comments that came in either by email or phone call?
No, sir. We have not reached any public comments for this as of now, and okay. I will report on Wednesday as well.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Spencer, would you like to make additional comments or statement?
Sure. So Spencer Terry, Carolina Land Development Group. My address is actually 1304 North Respite Street, Washington, North Carolina. So I don't want anybody to get too absolved with me being so far out of Apex. But my company does a tremendous amount of work, and I lived in the Raleigh area for 15 or 16 years. So I still do a lot of work in this area, quite a bit, and I spend a lot of my time driving back and forth, but that's by my own choice. Pretty much, we're looking at a collision center here. I can share a preliminary site plan with everybody if they're interested, or if I can, take control. The idea really is we're looking at 24 employees, 5 or 6 customers per day, 1 or 2 auto adjusters there as well. And let's see if this will share content. Can everybody see this?
Yeah, it came up, Terry.
Yes, sir.
All right, perfect. All right, so pretty much what we want to do is we want to access everything. Now, I will say one thing on the rezoning map that Lauren provided, there was one little area, and it's this little rectangle over to the left-hand side here. This is all easements. These are 2 easements that were proposed and agreed to with the Greenway waste facility over here to the south, or I guess technically to the west if we're looking at this. And so we're just going to access our property through the easement. We've got about 24 employees, like I said before. Most of this up here is employee parking. We do have a couple places for daily clients, but again, there's not a lot of client usage out of here because it is a repair facility. Any cars that will be slated or haven't been approved by the insurance companies to be fixed will sit right here in a gravel parking area, kind of over here in this wooded area. We're going to put a gravel parking lot over there just to keep those types of vehicles out of either the flow path and the actual site itself. This will be reserved for cars coming in and out of the body shop, as well as employee parking. Aside from that, everything that we want to do is within the UDO. We're going to take a couple of the UDO's reductions with the highway buffers that we have out here. There's typically a 100-foot highway buffer or thoroughfare buffer along the bypass. We can reduce that by 50 feet based on the section 8.26 buffering reductions with architectural features. So we'll take advantage of that. That 100-foot buffer would normally be right about through here, which pretty much creates this project. This property would be almost useless if somebody wasn't able to take care of that buffer. But we don't have to actually ask council for that because we can take advantage of it. So I think we're in a good spot. I think commercially speaking, I think this will work for light industrial uses. You've got the landfills to deal with out there. A lot of people aren't going to want to put residential right next to a landfill. And again, we're in accordance with and consistent with the 2045 zoning map. So that's kind of it. That's what we're proposing. If there's any questions, I'm certainly willing to answer them or get back with you guys by Wednesday if it's not in this realm of conversation. But yeah, if you guys have any questions, I'd love to garner those now.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Terry. And yeah, I kind of agree. There's, with the dump out there, there's not a whole lot you can put in there, especially with the on-ramp or the off-ramp coming off of 540. So, and this does help the tax base. So, but I'll turn it over. Anybody have any questions for Mr. Terry or for Lauren or any comments?
I was just curious, Mr. Terry, with the access point, the shared easement, if that is to remain, are you concerned with vehicles backing in and coming out against what looks like the solid waste? I don't even know what it is. It's like a material dump. Is that a concern?
Yeah, so that's been a concern with the owner from the waste services there. The way we're approaching it is we've got about 26 feet of cross-access easement in there that's already existing, curb and gutter. We have worked out an agreement with them so that we can park within that easement. Safety did come up as a concern, but a couple things we're directly related or next to this intersection right here on the old Smithfield Road. The only other thing that access supplies out there is the Wake County's dump, which is to the southwest corner. With that, we've worked it out. Only employees are going to park along there. There's about, I think, we've got a little less than 20. I think we're sitting at 14 spaces that are actually in the easement there. We're going to put in curb stops to keep people from driving all the way through them, but we're going to designate anything in the easement as employee parking so that cuts down on any of the potentials for conflict. There'll only be essentially two times of the day, around 8-ish in the afternoons, that we would see the majority of those folks leaving or coming in. Obviously, they'd be free to take lunch breaks, but we're by making those decisions, it really helps us put a lot of the parking that we can get, because these shops, the way they operate is there's going to be 16 bays. So they're going to want to be able to run the shop. Normally, there'd be 16 cars or about inside the shop, 16 spaces outside the shop, and then 24 spaces or thereabouts for employees. 24 employees would be maximum that they get. They typically run between 14 and 18, but we always have to account for additional. So that's how we're trying to handle that and any safety easements within the easement. But yeah, I think we've addressed it the best way we can. We've looked at it at two other options. We've also looked at 60-degree parking as you're coming into the easement and changing the kind of flow path through there with the two entrances. And then the other thing we looked at was doing parallel parking on both sides. The owners of the property, the Woodells, do have that existing agreement with the easement and the Greenway Waste Facility. That has all been resolved. It's up to us to decide as the developer which route we want to go. But again, to alleviate the safety concerns, we're more than willing to dedicate any of the easement parking to employees only.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Any other comments, discussion, questions? All right, hearing none. Thank you again, Mr. Terry. Thank you, Lauren, for the presentation. We will bring this for possible motion and vote on Wednesday. So that ends the public hearing part of the agenda. We have one item of new business. Amanda, are you ready to present the possible motion regarding amendments to the UDOs?
Yes, I'm ready to go. Last item, we have one amendment for you today to the Unified Development Ordinance. And there we go. So the proposed amendment is to the use classifications and use supplemental standards sections for a few uses that involve the consumption of alcohol, on-site consumption of alcohol. And the purpose is to set a requirement that when quarterly gross receipts are requested by a zoning compliance officer, that those receipts are submitted within 10 business days. Several uses such as bar, nightclub, wine bar, tap room, restaurant in general, brewery, distillery, and micro distillery all are regulated by a percent of their sales that are devoted to on-site consumption of alcohol. It's 49%. But unfortunately, the UDO does not provide an enforcement mechanism if those receipts are requested, the time frame in which they have to be provided. So the whole purpose of this amendment is to specifically state that such receipts shall be provided within 10 days upon request of a zoning compliance officer. Failure to provide the receipts in the specified time frame is a violation of this ordinance. And there were a couple references in the supplemental standards to that 49% requirement as well. And so that the same language is added in all of these sections. Staff is recommending approval of this amendment, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Okay. Thank you, Amanda. Yeah, it sounds like I read the same thing over and over and over.
You did.
So, any questions or comments for Amanda on this proposed amendment to the UDO or a possible motion?
This is Reggie. This one seems pretty straightforward. I'd like to make a motion to approve as written.
Reggie, you're breaking up. So did you make a motion?
Yeah, my headset batteries are probably getting low. I apologize. I'd like to make a motion to approve as written.
Okay, we have a motion to approve by Reggie. Do I have a second?
I second.
This is Tina, I'll second.
We had to, who?
Either way.
Okay, I heard Tina, so Tina seconds. So now we'll just go down roll call. So this is to approve the amendment to the UDO. This is Michael Marks, yes. Reggie Skinner.
Yes.
Mark Steele.
Yes.
Tina Sherman.
Yes.
Tommy Pate.
Yes.
Tim Royal.
Yes.
Keith Braswell.
Yes.
Ryan Akers.
Yes.
Okay, so the motion for the amendment passes unanimously and is approved. That completes all the new business. So with no other action other than remember Wednesday, dial in just a little bit before 5 o'clock, and we will go over the 4 public hearing items and have possible motions and a vote. And I just need a motion to adjourn.
Tim Royal, I'll motion to adjourn.
Okay, we got a motion from Tim. Do I have a second?
This is Ryan Akers. I'll second that.
And second. And we'll go through the roll call again. So Michael Marks, yes. Reggie?
Yes.
Mark Steele,
Yes.
Tina Sherman,
Yes.
Tommy Pate,
Yes.
Tim Royal,
Yes.
Keith Braswell,
Yes.
and Ryan Akers.
Yes.
All right. Motion passes unanimously. I appreciate everybody. Hopefully in February we are back in person. But you know, we survived this one, and I think you guys did a great job. So thank you very much. We will see you back virtually on Wednesday at 5 o'clock.
You got to have a great evening, everybody.
All right.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
See you guys.
Thank you. Have a great weekend.
Thank you.
See you guys.